a primary source in psychology, is one that provides direct evidence or data to answer a research question, such as an original research article, the data itself, surveys, or the test or measure used to collect data.
These sources can be tough to identify and understand, so we'll break them down in this video.
Here's an example of a primary source in psychology. An original research article, sometimes called an empirical study. These articles report experiments conducted by psychological researchers. This one is titled, Changes in Emotion Regulation, Following Cognitive Behavioral Therapy for Anxious Youth. Don't get intimidated by the specialized terminology. We'll talk strategies for this later. In simple terms, these researchers want to know if a specific type of therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT for short, helps anxious teens manage their emotions. Original research articles are peer-reviewed, meaning they undergo a rigorous process of review and editing by other researchers in the field of psychology before publication. They are the bread and butter of any psychology research project. You can spot research articles by their standard headings, which include the abstract, introduction and literature review, methods, results, discussion or conclusion, and references.
The abstract is a brief summary of the article and its findings. You can usually find it near the top of the first page of the article.
In the introduction and literature review, the researchers give the background of the research question and explain the importance of their study in this wider conversation. They define key terms and outline what we know using past research studies, while also pointing out what we don't know. Each research article in psychology is meant to further what we know, so establishing the gap is vital to the process. In this case, the authors talk about the scholarly debate over how emotional regulation should be conceptualized, defined, and assessed, and then give a history of treatments for anxiety in youth. In particular, the authors point out how anxious youth struggle with regulating sadness and anger, not only anxiety, and how a new treatment, emotion-focused cognitive behavioral therapy, help teens regulate all three emotions. This sets the stage for one of the author's hypotheses and research questions. Look for the hypotheses at the end of this section.
A hypothesis is an
Outcome the researchers expect based on the previous studies outlined in the introduction. Since emotion-focused cognitive behavioral therapy is based on cognitive behavioral therapy, the authors wonder whether cognitive behavioral therapy alone could account for the gains teenagers made in regulating all three emotions. One hypothesis for this article is that CBT alone will help teens regulate anxiety, but not sadness or anger. Next is the methods section. This is where the authors outline who participated in the study and how they conducted it, including the procedures, instruments, and variables. Everything a researcher would need to know to repeat the same study. In this section, we come across another primary source within psychology: tests and measures. A test or measure is the instrument used to collect the primary data in an experiment. Most research articles won't provide the actual measure used. In some cases, if that information became public, it would skew the results of future tests. In others, the measure is copyrighted information that needs permission and purchase before use. The measures for this article are not publicly available, but this is what one looks like. The next section in a research study is the results. This is where you'll find an aggregation of the data in relation to the hypotheses and research questions, along with visualizations of that data in charts and graphs. Primary data is another primary source in psychological research. Primary data is the information collected by a researcher in an experiment, such as surveys, interviews, observations, experiments, and psychometric tests. It can be quantitative, which is numerical and analyzed through statistical analysis, or qualitative, which is narrative and requires discourse analysis or other grounded methodologies to analyze. This data can be collected by the researcher directly or used retroactively from another researcher's set of data. Finally, we have the conclusion or discussion. Here is where the authors interpret their results. It's the section you'll hear the most of the author's scholarly voice as they explain what they believe are the implications of their research. This is also the section where authors will discuss gaps in their research or further questions that need to be answered. If you're looking for a research question to pursue of your own, this is a great place to look. For this article, the authors concluded that their hypothesis was correct. CBT only helped anxious teens regulate their anxiety, not sadness or anger. This may not seem like a large breakthrough, but with a new promising therapy, it is important to ensure the results are, in fact, from that therapy. In the conclusion, the authors will also list limitations or conflicts of interest. This information is key to evaluating the article. For example, this article mentions their data comes only from subjective self-report of the child and parents. This is a limitation because it relies on individuals' honesty and self-awareness, which may lead to bias compared to other more objective measures. They also mention that no direct comparison was made between the two treatments or with a control group. A study incorporating more objective psychological data and comparing multiple treatments in the same study would provide stronger evidence for their conclusions. All research has room for improvement, but reading the article and looking up terms until you understand these limitations is key to demonstrating your credibility on the topic. And of course, we can't forget the references section. Researchers in psychology build on the research that came before. If there are no or few references, it's likely you aren't looking at a research article. We spoke before about looking up terms. In psychological research, terms have very precise definitions. Notice the specific terminology of our example article: anxious symptomology, anxiety self-efficacy, dysregulation, and coping. Psychological research studies are written by researchers for other researchers. So, the authors assume you as a reader are already familiar with the definitions of variables, disorders, theoretical background, research methods, and how statistics are analyzed, the way someone who regularly researches psychology likely would. Because of this, the study will be harder to understand without that background knowledge. In the next video, we'll cover the secondary and tertiary sources you can use to get the background knowledge needed to understand these complex research articles.